This is episode 83 of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast, and I'm your host, John S. Today's episode is the first of two addressing the topic of sexual predation and harassment in Alcoholics Anonymous, and features a conversation with Heather B. from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Bethany B. from Jacksonville, Florida. We'll talk about the problem from their perspective and possible solutions. Our next episode on this topic will consist of the personal stories of women who have experienced sexual harassment and predation in the rooms of AA. Hello, I am with Bethany B. and Heather B. Bethany is from Jacksonville, Florida, and Heather is from Indianapolis, Indiana. And today we're going to talk about a subject that is pretty timely in the news. It's about sexual assault, harassment, predation in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Pretty heavy subject, but I think that it's an important one. And I think that a good way to start is by describing the problem from a couple of paragraphs from an article that Heather published in AA Beyond Belief some time ago. The article was called Predatory Behavior Within the Fellowship. And I'm just going to read these two paragraphs real quick. This is written by Heather. When someone with a significant amount of sobriety seeks out a romantic sexual relationship with someone new to the program and or sobriety, it's referred to as 13th stepping. It is predatory because at best it takes advantage of another's vulnerability and interferes with their recovery. At worst, it compromises the other person's sobriety, leading them back to alcohol and drugs. The program is often the first and sometimes only lifeline that many of us find. Many women, including myself, arrive carrying the weight of sexual trauma. Now we have to get sober in an environment filled with men we don't know. Imagine, on top of this, getting befriended by someone who pretends to help, offers you a lifeline, but only wants to sleep with you. It is irresponsible and reprehensible to manipulate a newcomer in this way. If we are to carry the message to those who suffer, it's up to us to honor, not take advantage of, the vulnerability that newcomers carry through the door. And I thought that was just an excellent description of what the problem is. Maybe a good place to start, if you guys don't mind, is maybe talking about some of your firsthand personal experience with this issue, and maybe even some secondhand observations that you've had since you've been in the rooms. Would you be willing to maybe start with that? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, John. So I guess, I first took a stab at trying to get sober in a different fellowship about 20 years ago, and found the environment there to be very meat markety, and it really just left a bad taste in my mouth. So about 10 years later, when I had periods of staying sober, trying to stay sober, relapsing, going to treatment. So there was a lot going on there. About 8 years ago, when I came back to the rooms of AA, there was a gentleman, and I already had I had a number of years of sobriety at this point. And he asked me to see a movie. I wasn't really sure at that if he was asking me, because he wanted to have a romantic type relationship, or if he just wanted to be friends. So the more I thought about it, the more I became uncomfortable with it. And just, when he called me, texted me, I just said, hey, look, I'm not comfortable with this. I think I misinterpreted your intent here. And that really set him off. He got really angry. He started rapid fire texting me. I ended up blocking him. He continued to come to this mixed, agnostic meeting that I attended here in Indianapolis. Was just really, he talked a lot about his untreated mental illness. He was really disrespectful to men and to women, but particularly to women. He was very aggressive and name calling, and always wanted to dominate the conversation, and would, a woman would share, he would shake his head, roll his eyes, grunt, sigh, make it known to the rest of the room that, he was the authority on sobriety. And so in any event, it got really ugly, and I won't drag this out any longer, but he ended up coming to a different, agnostic meeting. He called me and threatened me, first of all. It just this sort of, I don't know if it was real rejection or if it was just perceived rejection. I'm not sure. There were some other things, that happened in the meantime. My partner, who's also in the program, who's a man, came and, defended me and sort of told him. They scuffled a little bit. And, in any event, he ended up showing up to another meeting with a weapon. He assaulted my partner and went to jail that night. So about a year later, we had a trial, and he was charged with a felony, but he had a really good attorney and was found not guilty. So, yeah.
So was the group able to do anything, or did they try to do anything about this guy?
We talked about it, and I think everyone was kind of at a loss of what to do. I didn't attend that meeting consistently, and I certainly don't. I wish that the group as a whole had been more proactive about booting him out. But at the same time, I was part of that group, and there's this feeling of this is Alcoholics Anonymous. We're helping people save their own lives here. And so to really boot someone out could result in a relapse for them. So it's something that we took really seriously. And yes, there were several people from the group who were great about it, who tried to talk to him, who gave him warnings, but it just seemed to escalate and get worse and worse and worse. He he was harassing me. He was harassing a sponsee of mine. Who was also a woman, by the way. And so when my partner came to that meeting, after I'm I'm relaying all this to him, he came to the meeting and sort of man to man said, look, this is going to stop. And that kind of made it worse. So in any event, the group did try to reason with him, and that was not successful. Yeah. But I will say that at least the facility where those meetings are held, the board members there were very supportive, and they kicked him out, and he's no longer able to go there at all for any meeting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was wondering about, what to even do about this, and we can talk about that later. But one of the things is the people who rent the facility to our meetings we can let them know about what's going on, and they can kind of step in because they don't want to have that kind of a problem in their facility, I'm sure. So,
yeah. Well, and yeah, they were really supportive of, and he actually tried to show up there, a couple times after this happened. And the men who were on the board there, I think the police were called once or twice. I'm not really sure. I'm getting all this secondhand from them, but he did try to show up there, and they did not allow it.
A couple of years ago, I was having a conversation online with, I think, 4 women, and they were all from different states. And this topic came up of what we call 13th stepping, and I don't really use that term anymore. But I asked them, I said, have you guys experienced this? And every single one of them said that they did. And it kind of surprised me. But now what I'm hearing, in the media with all the news that's going on with the Me Too movement and so forth, it seems like that this is just such a widespread problem just throughout society, not just in AA, but particularly in AA. It's dangerous, and it's something that, that we need to be talking about and finding solutions for. Bethany, have you had experiences or any that you would like to share, related to this?
Sure. Yeah. And John, thanks for, opening up a dialogue about this. I think it's, this is one of the chief reasons that I, left physical meetings. I got sober right after I turned 23, and, I had gotten a sponsor, and I'd been sober, I don't know, less than 3 months. And my sponsor told me that, if I didn't date for the first year, that she would take me shopping at the end of the first year. And, she really was trying to incentivize me to kind of stay away from, any of that enmeshment. But, there was a fella that was going to this clubhouse where I was going to a lot of meetings, and he was about 17 years sober. He was a lot of these guys that we hear about are, pretty well respected because they have, time. They've been around a long time and they say things that make sense. And he, took me out and, it was something that resembled dating, and it was, romantic and sexual in nature. It was consensual on my part, but I didn't know that, the reasons why we avoided this were, to give newcomers a chance. And I didn't know that I was at risk of, drinking because of this. But, my sponsor, she said, listen, I can't tell you what to do, but if you're, I hope you're not messing around with this guy. And I was messing around with him. And, I think, I learned years later that she had taken him aside, like, just give it a rest, give it a shot, let her have a shot at this. And, I was probably emotionally beaten up, by this, fresh, raw rejection, just something that I, in the bar culture that I had been, a part of during my drinking years in college, it was a meat market kind of situation as well. And, to experience that sober, I was really like, I was shaken, but I didn't relapse because of that. But then, I stuck around long enough and went to tons of meetings and, just have witnessed just people's lives getting decimated by making poor decisions in their first year sober. And there's a woman in Indiana in Champaign that I respect a lot. She is at a lot of conferences, and I'll just respect her anonymity now. But in her area too, there's this pervasive culture of older men with time that are respected in the group that habitually predate the women in the rooms, and this happens in my area too. And so we're told too, John. Okay, what's your part in it? So I'm having to look at, this thing that happened, and it was totally inappropriate from the other party's perspective. But what is my part in it? Well, I accepted his offer of going out to dinner. And, this man did, and whatever else is my part in it. Did I, wink back at him or squeeze his hand, during the prayer at the end of the meeting? I mean, we're told to look at our part in some of these things where we really are just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Right. And, this fella, when I was 10 years sober, so I was like 33 at this time, he came up to me at a meeting, and I really just had not in like a, angry way. And I didn't, run around warning women about this fella. And he just kind of drifted away from AA and would only come back on his anniversary. But at 10 years sober, he came to me. So I guess he was 27 years at that time. And he said, I need to make an amends to you. I was like, yeah, I mean, like, he said, you look so young. I'm like, well, how do you think I looked 10 years ago?
Oh, wow.
And he was a bit of an older, he got sober young too, but he was, significantly older than I was at the time. But, that was it. It was kind of like two passing ships, and I got an amends for that, which, I do appreciate that to a degree, but it's like, the problem is so overwhelming. It's, I almost like I don't want to go to AA and even see it anymore. And I certainly at this point don't know if I could even recommend this as a place for, people that I care about. It's just like some bad stuff goes on.
Do you think that the other men in the group knew that he was doing this?
Oh, sure. I'm sure because it was really, consensual, and because I have a bit of a mouth on me that probably we were more evenly yoked than, some people that are, perhaps in financially dire straits or, don't have opinions and things like that. So I did, years later, at the same clubhouse, some of the older men were out at this picnic table or whatever. And one of them said that, they had all bet on me, and some of them had actually lost some money. They didn't think I was going to make it. Let's talk about how sick that is.
I know that is really, and I hope that, I've heard that before, and I hope that they were just kidding, but they weren't actually literally doing that. But who knows? It's sick, isn't it? The reason I was asking about that, about if other men knew, because I'm becoming a little bit more sensitive now about recognizing what's going on and then speaking out if I see something that doesn't seem right. But here's an example of something that happened at our home group. There was a guy that had been sober for maybe 30 years, and he would come to our meetings with a young woman who was just getting sober. Mm-hmm. And they were dating, I guess. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is inappropriate for somebody who's 30 years sober to be dating someone who's just getting sober. He should know that she needs some space. And I didn't say anything. And they kept coming to our meetings. And another woman in our group pointed out to me as 13th stepping. I said, really? And that sounds stupid, but it's like, yeah, I should have gone to that guy and said, you know what, this is inappropriate. You've been sober for 30 years. This woman is just now getting on her feet on the ground, stand back, So, but how do you,
So John, really the last straw for me in, leaving the, physical meetings in AA was, there's this tight knit group of women that, kind of have had their clique for a number of years in my regional area. And, after this convention where I met you, I talked to my sponsor who was, affiliated with that group. And there was a woman that, she was still under a year sober. And within that first year, she had already married, this fella that had been sober 30 years. Within her first year, she's new to the area, new to AA. And, even before she hit a year, she already had gotten married to this fella in that group. And I asked my sponsor about it. I said, how do you reconcile that? And she said, well, women have a part in it too. And that was actually our last conversation. She asked me to, she texted me and suggested I should write about some of my feelings about that. And I did. I wrote a blog and I sent her a link.
But a lot of this is about, we say the person has the other part. I don't know how true that is when you're looking at the power balance. It's like in the workplace. If you have someone who's a manager over a subordinate, that's not really an equal relationship. Or if you have somebody, like what's going on now, who's in the media and is a very powerful person in the media, and you have someone else who's trying to rise up. If you have someone who's been sober and knows the ropes of AA inside and out, and someone who doesn't is not sure of themselves, that's just not an equal relationship. And I think that the person who has the power has the responsibility to not leverage that, to stand back. But these are probably not well people. This is what's so odd about it. It's
we
like
give so much authority and respect to these people who are, perhaps career criminals and have done some unspeakable things. And here they are as role models,
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is that you were talking about the power imbalance. Women, at least in my regional area, are often the minority. I know that's true in the agnostic meetings here. It's not uncommon to go to a meeting where it's 90% men, 10% women. So when you're, pushing that gap even further of this guy has 5 years, this guy has 10 years, you're new, and you're also the only woman in the room.
Yeah, I see that imbalance in our group too. I think there's probably at any given time, it's a vast majority men to women. Lately, it's been more like a 30-70 kind of a mix. The way that we put people on pedestals that have long periods of sobriety or say things, we hear them say, they talk the program talk. I think that's a danger in a way, is that, and the whole thing of sponsorship of having these people have some sort of authoritative air about them simply because they say things
wholly unqualified to counsel another person on how to live their life. And maybe even people that have that have a personality fallibility or disorder, even such that they enjoy dominating other people and telling them what to do. I mean, it's just the whole it's a flawed system.
And in my situation, the man talked freely in the meeting about his untreated mental illness. Mm-hmm. And this guy was sponsoring people. So, I think that, this is probably a topic for a different podcast, but it just highlights how unable to handle mental illness, the fellowship really is.
But there's got to be a way that we can protect the group. I was looking at that too, of possible solutions. And I was reading your article, Heather, and one thing that you mentioned in your article was, the importance of men speaking out when they see things going on that doesn't seem right. You want to talk about that? Maybe some solutions that you see for the problem? Any ideas?
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting. When I wrote that article, I remember a comment that someone made at the bottom that said, "I'm sorry, good men cannot keep the bad men out. And I thought, well, that's pretty telling. And I wondered if that was kind of the feeling across the board, that men felt like that it wasn't any of their business. But I would argue that, as we're seeing now, like you mentioned, in our culture as a whole, rape and sexual assault are not really a woman's problem. I think as a whole, we need to hand this problem back to you. And while I am certainly willing to have conversations about what the solutions are, I also think that this isn't a woman's problem. We didn't create this problem. Mm-hmm. And so it really is, because of that, it really is up to men to step up and solve it. I do think that just as it's my responsibility when I see it, and hey, I've seen this happen. I've seen, the guy who's always with the cute young mm-hmm. newcomer. Yep. I see this I see it, and mm-hmm. I don't say anything either. So it's my responsibility, I think, as a member of the AA community, to reach out to her and maybe offer her something. But I also think that when men see this behavior in other men, it's important that they put a stop to it as well.
I do too. I've been getting to understand that. I mean, I think I think there's certain degrees of this too, where I don't think that men I don't think the men who are doing this, who are the predators, who are the assaulters, are necessarily talking about what they're doing to, with other men. Maybe they are, but I haven't heard that. And I think it's kind of a problem that, like, if I see something, like I see the guy with the young woman or whatever, and I just kind of turn my head and say, it's none of my business. They know what they're doing or whatever. And I think that's where what I need to change is that mindset that no, if it feels wrong, I have an obligation to that woman to let her know, hey, this isn't appropriate. This may not be appropriate. Think about this. And I should go to the guy and say that I don't think this is appropriate. What you're doing, give her some space, wow.
Right. And it's also important, for me to reach out to the women who are newcomers and, give them my phone number. And because I've seen it happen where a cute newcomer female comes in and then after the meeting, she's surrounded by men.
Oh, that's actually, okay. So, I actually have a story about that. So when I was, maybe 10 or 12 years sober, I had told my sponsor, like, hey, I think this whole God thing is kind of a crock. And I think that everybody in these meetings that believes it, I think they're, I don't respect them. I think they're dim. And, she's like, well, go to a meeting where you don't know anybody and listen for a different message. And so I went to this meeting, for the first time where I didn't know anybody. And, it was obvious that I didn't know anybody there. And it was my first time. And I was surrounded by men. And I was like, thanks for the schedule. I don't need your phone number. Yeah.
Wow.
So at the Thursday at one of the agnostic meetings, and we've actually started just an agnostic women's meeting here, but at the mixed meeting, there are a couple mixed meetings, but at one of them, at the end of the meeting, it's in the format to announce who the female contact is and who the male contact is. So if you're new, please approach this person. You're kind of directed to, at least pointed in the right direction.
I was actually thinking about our group creating a actual sexual harassment policy and procedures, because companies have these, and you have a process to follow where you can say, first of all, I think it should be something that's in writing, and we can give it to every newcomer, and we can have like a safe contact where people can call, and maybe it can even be a third party or something. But I'm kind of thinking that we could actually come up with some sort of an actual policy and process and let people know it's in place. And I think that could help with so that if somebody is a victim, or at least they could be aware that they're even a victim. They might not even know, until they see this thing in writing that says, this is an issue that can happen here. So I'm kind of thinking about trying to get something together like that. And I know that we could have like a woman and a man in our group who could be like, a safe person that you can go to and speak to. but also I'm thinking about the people who operate the facility where we meet to let them know about our policy and maybe even have them as a contact person. These are just kind of some thoughts I've had. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I also wonder too, what do you guys think about the idea of bringing it up as a topic in a meeting?
Well, I think it's a great way for people to add to the list of reasons to shun a person, from AA. And, I'm really not even joking about that. And I think, if I had been, if I had not just walked away from this community that I'd been a part of, but if I had, said things out loud, then certainly see that I would have been, vocally outspoken, loudly shunned. I hate to be pessimistic, and I really, I don't know what the answer is, and I just choose not to participate anymore. It's overwhelming.
You and I were talking just a little bit in Jacksonville, and something that you said there, that it's like these men, it's almost like the religious nature of AA itself gives these people this authoritative air about them. And it's really sick in a way, how the rest of the group idolizes these people. And you pointed out that there are a lot of people that are really well respected that are just serial predators. That is amazing. That's what needs to happen, I think, is that as a culture in AA, we need to find these predators and bring them to light and let them know it's not okay, that's, and shun them, the predators. So,
which is what's happening, we're seeing this shift in culture in American culture happening right now.
That's right. And it seems, and I think that's been an amazing thing to watch. And I think that would be helpful in AA, is to bring these people out, and show them for what they are, regardless of, because there's a lot of men, you see them come public, people in the public, in the news media or actors or whatever, that that I would think, well, I love their work and I think that they're a good person, but then you find out what they're really doing, and it's I don't know, it's eye opening, and that this exists in AA too, but there's plenty of people out there that are, highly respected, and, we think they have a great program and everything, but behind the scenes, they're a serial predator, and we need to bring those people out, I think, and to make the rest of us safer. But also, I like the idea of women's meetings too, and I know that they're real popular, and there's some women in our group that were talking about starting one, but they haven't really gotten anything off the ground. I'd like to see that going too. And you mentioned this too in your article, Heather. You said that that's a good idea to have the women's meetings, but that you didn't like the idea of us being totally segregated. That's not a total solution.
Women's meeting, at least in my experience, women's meetings we always go deeper. People share on a deeper level, could be the safety factor. Women just feel more safe being open, and we can talk about our experience, sexual and otherwise, that doesn't always feel comfortable. It doesn't always feel comfortable doing that in a mixed meeting. Alcoholism, for me, involved a lot of promiscuity, right? So, but I also think that, there's a lot to be learned from everyone in the program. And so, I don't know. I think I love women's meetings, but I'd also like to see the culture change rather than just segregating us completely.
I went, for my first 25 years in AA, I went almost exclusively to an all, men's meeting, which a lot of people might find kind of unusual. I just kind of fell into that group. I didn't go to it just because it was a men's group. It's just because I think when I was starting out there were other people my age and I just felt comfortable with. And so that's the group that I went to. But then, after 25 years, then I started the We Agnostics group. And of course it's a mixed group, men and women. And I really enjoyed that because I never really got to hear from women all those years that I was in the program. So I really like having, I like having that perspective. But one thing that I learned from that is there's a real difference between how men and women share sometimes in meetings. And there was one issue that we had at our Friday meeting that was causing a problem where women would come in and they would share. And then these older guys, and I think that they meant well, but it was really frustrating because they would be offering advice and counsel, and it's like, I don't know if that seems to be what happens. It's like that men might sometimes, and they also, I notice sometimes that women seem to be more talking from experience, whereas a lot of times the men will be quoting from some book or something. So there's a little bit of a difference, sometimes between men and women, how they share in meetings. And I think that men should be aware of that a little bit more. I'm only aware of it, I think, because I noticed that difference and then talking to some of the women in our group, and we had that particular problem in our Friday meeting, which, is really difficult to address. We tried to address it through telling people that we can't have crosstalk, because it was kind of in the form of crosstalk, people saying, oh, this is what you should be doing or whatever.
Well, it's telling too that, the big book is really pretty patriarchal. It was written by men, and it's also written from the male perspective. So when I first came in, I could never relate to this ego run wild, thing that the big book describes, because I came in feeling like shit. Yeah. I came in hating myself, incredibly low self-esteem, lots of shame, lots of guilt. So I couldn't really relate to that. And I think that not that that's true across the board for all women, but I know for me that was difficult to relate to.
Did you feel that way, Bethany?
Well, I guess I just, I was thinking that, I haven't, been around, the fellowship, since the summer, actually, John, since that weekend that I met you. And I'll have to say, I'm not upset about it. I'm not looking for solutions for it because I'm not involved in it. And so I know that pretending like it doesn't exist, I will say that I am not conflicted about it any longer because I just don't see it. And I know that's really just like a sad way to look at it. But, if depending on the type of agnosticism or atheism that you have, if there's really no meaning to any of this, why is, I can certainly find community elsewhere with a lot less headache.
So you're pretty much just done with it. Done with AA pretty much. Yeah. That's so amazing because you were really involved heavily for a long time, weren't you?
Daily meetings per my sponsor.
And it was that state convention in Jacksonville, huh?
Yeah.
Incredible. That's amazing.
Do you know what I do with my extra hour a day?
What do you do?
Anything I want.
Well, that's cool.
No, I just said good, right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm also sad. I'm also, hearing you say that makes me sad. And that was one of the reasons that we started a women's meeting here, is to provide people like you a place to go.
Yeah, that experience in Jacksonville was kind of an eye-opener, wasn't it, Bethany? It was kind of, because you heard us talk about the program in a different way, I guess, than you've ever heard before.
Yeah, I didn't know that, I was not alone in feeling this, like, what are these people even talking about? And, just to understand that other people had this, existential disconnect, that, I certainly felt, I've been using reality as my higher power all along anyway. Like, my life is very crappy when I'm drinking, and it's been, fairly easy ever since. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense for me to drink, and I don't need to sit in these rooms to be reminded of that, But, for me, AA was so, I'm conflicted because I was so young when I got sober, and really everybody was so welcoming, and it was, a way better life than what I was doing, on my own devices. But, for me, it was just time to move on. But, I've had, awakenings of the whatever variety you want to call it, where, something happens, or I hear something or read something and just all of a sudden look at something a different way. It's like flipping a switch. And that's happened numerous times in my life. And this is just one of them that's like, I hope it works out.
Yeah.
Because what we hear about people that quit going. So.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, I sometimes think about leaving myself, but, I don't know. I'm kind of committed to this whole agnostic AA thing now. So I do enjoy it. I do love it. And I do want to have a safe place. How I feel is that we need to create a safe place for people who are in a time of crisis, because like it or not, if people are having a problem with drinking, they're going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd just like for there to be a safe place for them to get them through that time of crisis for however long they might need it. Some people might only need it for a month. Some people might need it for 6 months. But I had that for me, and I was a young person too, Bethany. I was 25, and man, I just needed a safe place where I could talk and people could listen, and it just meant it saved me. And I think there's some value in that. So maybe that's why I'm still around. But I can certainly respect people who choose not to, because it can be an unhealthy environment, no doubt about it. So.
Yeah, if I'm the role model in the room, I need to be in a different room.
Yeah, that's funny. This was a very constructive conversation, and I appreciate you guys agreeing to do this. It's such a deep topic. There's so much to explore here. So many behaviors and so forth. Do you have any final thoughts on the topic that you wanna express, either one of you?
I just want to say thank you for opening up the dialogue, and thank you too. I know you do a lot of work for the AA agnostic movement. So I appreciate you giving us, this platform to share our stories.
Well, you're welcome.
Yes,
and thank you very much.
I echo that.
Great. Well, thank you. I think I interrupted you, Bethany.
Oh, no, I was just echoing Heather's sentiments. Thank you so much, John. I mean, just, getting to know you and all that you've done for this community is much appreciated.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been an education for me, too. All right. Well, thank you all very much. You all have a nice weekend.
You too. Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening, everybody. That concludes another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Next week's episode will feature additional stories from women about sexual harassment and predation in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So join us again for episode 84 as we continue to explore this topic.